Okay, number eight. And there's a funny story about number eight, in that it's responsible for my Twitter handle because when I was at school, someone who I won't mention because they're still a good friend of mine, listened to me wax on about the mythology in this one and how interesting it was before being bored out their tiny saying, "You're such a sud with lit, Michael, hence at sudlit."
Um, I don't think you've told me that one before.
Now there's a I can't do a face reveal, but I can do a Twitter meeting reveal as the show goes to pot. Um, it's got mythology, it's got war, it's got a cast which is up there as one of the greatest in the show's history. Uh, it's one of the first DVDs I got, and I have watched it to death. Which is quite going given that when I first saw it aged eight, at one pivotal cliffhanger, I went, nope, too scary, and turned it over to something else instead. Number eight is The Curse of Fenric.
Hey! Obviously, it's not the best McCoy, but oh my lord, yes, please. You know, there was this thing around the late 80s, early 90s where that older generation of fans was quite happy to, shall we say, to do down the show, to do down the current version of the show, which is where you get John Nathan Turner's quote of the memory cheats from. And it was, yeah, I think I've quoted this so many times, but the DWB series poll, where it was entirely rigged to put, I think Evil of the Daleks was number one, a show that the vast majority of the readership would never have seen. And yeah, and if you read, this is what we did with the stats. You rigged it. And they had a worst kind of list, which was filled with McCoy and Colin Baker stories. And you can understand Colin Baker's mindset at this point. But then you get this and you're going, why the hell? How the hell can anyone call this terrible? It's produced on, frankly, half a shoestring. And it is one of the great horrors. It has the genius, again, as Beryl Reid in Earthshock we were talking about before. It has genius of casting Nicholas Parsons, a man you don't think of it, and he gives such a terrific performance again of a man losing his faith, and just the whole idea of it, to retrospectively make sense of the entire convoluted Ace storyline.
Oh,
Oh, and yeah, and generally Dinsdale Landon, one of the great performances of a very third era for great performances.
no, I'll try and reply without repetition, deviation, or hesitation uh,
Hey,
for just a minute. But Nicholas Parsons is one of my favourite guest spots in the show. Um, I mean, obviously, they were going back to the fact that he was one of the well-regarded straight men in theatre in the 50s. So he had a great solid CD he could go back on, which had been somewhat overlooked in his Sale of the Century days. Um, but
absolutely.
he's so great at playing this tragic character, the man who has so much humanity in him, but he's lost his faith in his own religion, and he so wants to do good by everyone that it dooms him. And what dooms him is his courage to try and be better than he is.
The reasons he's lost his faith, the bombs over
Yes,
Dresden.
and the really tragic moment is we find out later that it's not religious faith that defeats the hemovores; it's faith in general. And he's so focused on having lost his religious faith that he never notices that the one thing that's driving him is his overriding humanism, that he wants to help other, and if he'd focused on that, he wouldn't have been bumped off. So
That's runs through the story like a stick of rock. That theme, that the inhumanity in war, and how you have to almost how rising above it is the best thing to do. You know,
yes,
what happens? That's the solution to the whole chess problem in the end. White and Black cooperate.
It's
Uh,
set it's set up in that excellent sort of monologue, when I was a child,
yes,
and
I
he
spoke
can't,
to a child.
and it comes when he can't remember the last line of the sermon.
And of course, it should be noted that Fenric's defeat is because the ancient team of all remembers its humanity.
Yes,
Humanity coming together to defeat the outsider, to defeat the one who can't understand this thing of white and black coming together, who, as we've seen by the way, he can't see the solution to that chess problem.
and it's set up for the fact that it's through Ace's faith and faith in humanity through Ace's representation. Right back when Nicholas Parsons just lost his faith, and what does she say? You can believe in me. I mean,
Yeah,
it's slightly on the nose, but it's leading up to that conclusion.
and that conclusion where the Doctor has to break Ace's faith in him is one of the most brutal things in the whole program. It's a precursor to the more emotional storytelling of that we get from the 21st Century series.
Yeah, I mean, it does get brought up as the grim dark bastard Doctor from the McCoy era taking Ace to scenes of great trauma, but I will say, in his benefit, do we ever get it? Is it ever revealed that he knows that's her mother? Fenric knows, but
Yeah,
there's enough ambiguity that might be that's a surprise to both the TARDIS crew.
true. And more important, we know Fenric is a git as well because he's trying to steal the copyright on Super Ted. He's got a Super there 40 years early.
Hmm.
Just, come on. I know you can't get Mickey Mouse, but yeah.
I mean, because of Fenric obviously steals insanely from the fog, but if you're going to snick from any horror, what better one than a John Carpenter?
So,
Uh,
and if you,
some
yeah,
of
Doctor Who is, to a large degree, can be horror for kids. You translate that down to a young audience. Would you say, therefore, Mr. Collins, that this is partially responsible for warping your young mind?
um, well, I don't think I could quite give it that credit, given I turned it off as soon as the Hemivores appeared out of the sea. Not too scary.
Again, what a great set piece.
Yes. And I love the fact that one of those Hemivores is McCoy's son.
Hmm.
Do you
Oh,
want to be Doctor Who? Yes. So
and it was, yeah, and I think it was a program called Take Two. They were doing a making of scene, and they were doing how they did all these shots.
yes,
Fabulous.
and there's so many nice horror moments in it. Uh, I particularly think of the the soldier walking to his death in
Oh
the,
yeah, into the sea, just hypnotized.
and of course there's Janet Henfrey playing a battle axe, slightly
Yeah.
typecast there, but she's wonderful in the short period of time she's there before she too is bumped off by the charges she took under her own roof.
Yeah, and obviously the siege of the church as well.
Uh, but I mean, it's so wonderfully cast. You've got Nick Parsons, Dinsdale Landon, such a great actor. He,
He makes that cliffhanger to part three. Just
oh
that
yes,
the way the eyes snap open. We play the contest again. Of course, Time Lord. Oh,
works so well because he makes Judson grumpy but sympathetic.
yes.
So when he becomes the complete opposite,
He's
uh,
driven. It's because he's grumpy because he's always driven to go. It's almost, yeah, I don't want to impose it. it's almost the kind of almost autistic focus, you know, just that focus on something, the focus on the goal. Doesn't like being disturbed. Gets very unhappy when he's distracted. It's that kind of it's a person that personality trait rather than I'll say a definitive thing. So there's an element there.
And
And
there's
there's the relationship he's got with Alfred Millington as well.
yes, Alfred Lynch's Commander Milling,
Yes. The
and
long day.
he's another one who's very good. It's the stillness. There's the scene where the soldier walks in and he's just completely non-moving as if he's an auton in the background,
Yeah,
uh, or the sort of almost creepy monotone, except for the hints of joy in it when he's talking about the plans to unleash the poison on a major city.
yeah.
It's
A monomaniacal. He's got the replica of is it Hitler's uh,
yes, bunker office.
in his office. He's just such an odd character. And again, he's doomed by his complete lack of ability to relate to the rest of humanity, his lack of hope.
Yes, he's semi-tragic in that he's clearly been manipulated by Fenric, and he seems to be the only character there who realizes they're being manipulated by Fenric, but he even so either views it as an enemy of my enemy situation, or he's already too far gone in his own mania to fight it.
Absolutely. And then obviously you've got Sorin as well, Mark Anton, who's only like 2 stories removed from being a quite brilliant performance as the Destroyer, to be honest, which I know goes down very well with large chunks of Doctor Who fandom. But again, a very different role, and until the end. Oh, spoilers, and again, he nails that switch from himself to Fenric. You have to give 2 performances, and it's beautifully done. Oh yeah,
Of course.
and what saves humanity? Hope, faith, and cooperation. It's a brilliant anti-war story.
How strong is this cast? We've not even mentioned Anne Bloody Reid yet.
No, oh yeah, again, perfect role for her. She just the way she treats Judson literally as an invalid when he doesn't want to be treated that way.
She's
It's really good on social attitudes, this script.
she's so polite in public and a bully in private.
Yeah, totally. Oh, yeah. Again, I'm just off. I'll see you in 90 minutes or so.
But I mean, you've got the Norse mythology aspect, the well of Veldemir.
Oh, yeah. The runes burning into the rock.
Yes, the translations and how you take the concept of the ancient stuff from the fog and then put it through the Enigma machine. Of that, it just you've got all of these flawed people in a war zone. They're flawed, but none of them are horrible, shall we say. They're damaged people in war, but they've all got stuff about them, but they're all being overwhelmed by this complete evil that's coming about from beyond. It's
Brilliantly done.
even Perkins dies. Poor Perkins. Number 7 is a story which was the end of an era. It wasn't planned from the off. It became an emergency fill in after a whole bunch of faulty scripts fell to the wayside. But what we got from this maelstrom of chaos is one of the all-time classics, and one that, as the decades go on, fandom is taking to more and more as one of the highlights of the 60s. I am, of course, talking about the end of the Troughton era, the War Games.
Oh, the first story that tries to answer Doctor Who.
Yep.
Yeah, it's again one of these that I bought really early on. You get a story that's 10 episodes long, and generally they shouldn't work because there are very few stories long enough to sustain 4 hours. But this does it, and I know Terrence Dicks is very modest when he goes, "Yeah, we just stuck an extra war zone in if we needed another week of it." But it really works as this anti-war, this examination of war. The way the war zones are realised, but particularly that 1917 zone early on. Oh yeah, it has such a sense of occasion. It has a fitting sense that you could carry 10 episodes with, because it's a huge plan. They want to enslave humans to conquer the universe because we're the most aggressive species out there. Wonderful, simple plan. And then obviously, how do you draw this to a conclusion? In I think it might have been half an idea that Doctor Who might have finished around here. So it then you answer, you bring the mythology, and you lose some of the mystery. Obviously, later on, a lot of that be restored, but it does create something epic at the end there. Something the Doctor's greatest foes end up being his own people,
Yes.
and it has a great argument. Why should Doctor Who exist? Patrick Troughton up there giving you the exact reasons.
Yes.
Because it's fun watching this man fight the monsters.
I like how it's sort of a relay race. You start off with World War One. You think, how will
Yes,
this be do 10 episodes? And then you realise that Smythe has alien tech. But then
yes.
and then the Romans appear. So they're introduced the fact that this is an alien planet. And then when they get there and they meet the war chief, you've got one of my favourite scenes in all of the show where the war chief sees the doctor sees the war chief, and they both recognise each other instantly.
And no words, are there? Just
No, it's
looks.
and that completely changes everything from that point on. And then you've got the resistance angle, and when that starts to run out of steam, you've got Time Lord showing up.
Oh, glorious. And I love the war chief and the warlord stuff. That little, because a lot of things with the 60s particularly, and with Doctor Who's budgets, you get kind of homogenous alien races. They're all in on the plan. And here you've got two guys who are basically, power struggles.
Yes, the power struggle between Edward Brayshaw and James Bree.
Oh, no, what a stupid fool you
You
are.
are.
I know that gets criticised for delivery. I love that delivery of it. I think this is something you were saying the other day somewhere else. It's the way it's this little pen pushing guy who's got the win, who's got this. He's taken his rival down, and he loves it.
And he's got no imagination, so he's forced to just echo the words of his rival at the greatest moment of his success. Because it's just a wonderfully frustrated performance, I think.
I agree, time. Oh,
And in the middle of the two of them, you've got Vernon Dobchev, the great Vernon Dobchev, as as the scientist, stuck in the middle of the two of them, and the whole
he
and
gets comedy roles as well.
yes, and he gets to be the first person to use the phrase "Time Lord" on screen, and it's
Yes.
a throwaway line.
Oh, and obviously the way they just go, well, what do we call these travel boxes? Sid rats, we'll call it
Yes,
TARDIS in reverse.
and obviously, again, after all of these characters, I mean, we all have to mention, Von Eyck and Smythe, who are two great villains in their own right.
Oh,
Um,
I love Smythe. The way he delivers those, like with a bit of, he's a sadist, and you can tell the relish in those lines.
yes, the way he takes over the tribunal in episode one, and the uncomfortable way that that probably happened in real life without any aliens involvement.
Again, if we go to back to Secret Army, Terence Hardiman's character in the prison camp,
Yes.
that's the way they, you're all mad.
Hmm. But once they bump off Von Eyck and Maeve, they only go and bring in Philip Maddock.
Yeah, it's like a computer game, isn't it? You're bringing
Yes.
in next level bad guy.
I mean, can you think of any other Doctor Who that has six memorable villains? All quotable.
How many other Doctor Who stories have room for that many villains?
Yes. Oh, and Philip Maddock is great because he never, you can always tell he's really annoyed, but he's always got that just keeping his emotions in check voice.
Yeah, and again, a form of sort of stillness. Yeah, it's controlled, and he's so, and it's a man who believes in, the ends justifying the means, and he argues that philosophy right to the end. Oh,
Also, really like Carstairs as a one-off ally.
oh yeah, Carter and Lady Jennifer here as
Yes,
well. Oh yes, it's a lovely double act. And again, I think like everyone else, I'd like to believe they met up and at the end and they go off. But
I mean, even in the smaller roles, you've got actors of the caliber of Leslie Schofield playing a good guy. What the hell? You've got
yeah,
Rudolph
that's
Walker's in
probably
it.
when I first watched it. That was like,
Yes,
what's going on?
uh, Ru-
Yeah,
Rudolph Walker's in it. David Troughton,
yes. Was it his first screen appearance, or it's a no? I think he was an actor in Henry Thor, wasn't he? A very early screen appearance, anyway.
and amusingly, Michael Napier Brown as a comedy Mexican bandit. I say amusingly because apart from this one appearance in Doctor Who, which fans remember, his real life claim to fame was he was one of the most regarded theatre directors of the 20th century. He ran the Theatre Royal in Northampton for 3 decades. He's like one of the theatre names in Britain, but fandom remembers him for playing this OTT character in 2 episodes of Doctor Who.
Yeah, and obviously you can't defend the kind of thing these days. You can say he gives that performance absolutely everything on that, and it works. But again, you wouldn't cast him in that role today.
No, but
For
then he's
lots
forgotten. He's forgotten because the Time Lords show up, and
yes,
they're never better.
yeah. Again, it's the godlike mysterious beings. I understand why Robert Holmes kind of brought them down to a human level, but they dull that way. I think it's far more interesting if they are these more powerful beings, the ones that you know. Because one of the points of the Doctor is he's he's the little guy compared to the Time Lords. He's a guy who just went, "Nah, I'm off. I can't stand them," and he's less. The running joke about the Grady guy at the Academy.
Yes.
It's great. So, and then he's up against the Time Lords, who are actually quite competent and really powerful. And again, in this, the most powerful, he cannot face his own people down. It's
Yes.
the one foe that he is inferior to, that he is in, that he can't just figure his way out. He tries everything in those last 2 episodes, but it never comes close to it.
I
And
will add, sorry, I will add, I don't think my mum has ever forgiven the show for Jamie and Zoe's exit.
that was about to come to exactly that. It's
Yes.
one of the tragic moments in the whole show. And again, it's repeated. 40 odd years later with Donna.
Yeah, it's the
Yeah,
book.
mind wipe and particularly with Jamie, who's been there through this Doctor side for 3 whole years worth of adventures, everything apart from his first story.
But Wendy Padbury gets one of the great horrific last lines in Who, where she's just standing there worried and turns and goes, "Oh, I thought I'd forgotten something important, but it's nothing."
I just, it's why I love the comic strip The World Shapers, because it has they go back and see Jamie years
Yes.
later. Yeah, I knew a few tricks. They didn't get me.
And then there were six. Number six, the Dalek invasion of Earth.
Wow, I did not expect that to be in the top 10. I'm quite pleased with that. I said I like it when these kind of unexpected stories
Yes.
go to the top 10. And I think we today, it's Peter Capaldi's talked about, the Web Planet as being something that in that day it had wonder, it had a mystique to it. It was designed for these, what it was, 6-inch square television screens, with vastly on lens, where you wouldn't necessarily see, notice the clunking into the screen and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And this is exactly the Dalek invasion of Earth. Can you imagine how that is? You've had Daleks with this creatures that put Doctor Who up to 10 million viewers, and it's taken them nearly a year to get back to the screen. And can you imagine how thrilling that would be as a 7 or 8 year old back then?
Mm-hmm.
Where you just wait. I would have been sat vibrating in front of that television screen, waiting for it to come in. And then they spent the whole first episode obviously going, no, not yet, not yet, not yet. That's why that will only show the Dalek at the end of the first episode is brilliant for that whole story. And I love it because it's far, far too ambitious for Doctor Who. The show overreaching its ambition, its capacity. It can't possibly do this story effectively, but it gives it a damn good go. That particularly at the end with the scenes coming out to the work quarry, those have a real sense of scale to them.
Yes.
And it's just Terry Hitchens' survivalist kind of London. Just this, again, something that's effective done in Invasion of Dinosaurs later on. This effective kind of deserted city. The kind of horror that's been empty. Really, it is. I know it can't force stories to go to modern day London, but it's essentially the Daleks in modern day London. The point is the Yeti on Lou and Tooting Beck, watching them against these old familiar landmarks.
Yeah.
And the mess they make of the world is the real horror of the show, and that's why it really works for me and why I love it.
I mean, the thing that comes to me from the Invasion of Earth is that the Daleks are utter bastards in it.
Totally.
They exterminate Baker when he's surrendered. They kill that guy off screen. They kill the guy in episode 2, but wait till he's realised he's not got anywhere to go. And poor old Dortmund, uh, Alan, in that great role. They kill him, but they wait just a split second so that his last sight will be that the bomb that he's been working so hard on, that sacrificed so much and people sacrificed for it, doesn't work. They're gets.
They're sadists. Yeah, I think there's a lot of David Whittaker in that as well.
And at the other end of the schedule, you've got the human leads, primarily Ann Davis and the great Benner Kay,
Yes.
with such a great naturalistic performance in this one. They're both pessimists to the nth degree. They think humanity's doomed. They think they're doomed. That there's no point in fighting. But they do it anyway because if they didn't, their friends would be hurt, and they can't stand by even when they think that they're sacrificing themselves to do it. And as a result, they actually live to the end and get as much of the happy ending as you can from the Dalek invasion of Earth.
Yes. Oh, and then there's the details of the posters. The elephant. Apparently that's a poster for a kind of beer. There was someone did a fantastic thread on Twitter where they found the actual image, the elephant, why it's got that style to it. Another reason to the Dalek invasion of Earth there. And it's so good, obviously, they made a film of it.
Yes. And of course, Susan leaves. The companions leave.
And that, again, it's one of the great scenes. Susan, I think it's fair to say that she's been really underused. They never really get the potential of her. So I can understand why Carol Ann Ford wanted to get out pretty quickly, but that last scene is so heartbreaking, and the Doctor leaves her with one shoe as well. What a bastard! But that yeah. One day I shall come back. Yes, I shall come back. It breaks your heart. The fledgling flies the coop, so to speak.
The thing that strikes me about Dalek Invasion of Earth and why it's a deserving point in our top 10 is that if it hadn't succeeded, we wouldn't have had the Earth Under Siege stories that are make up the classic bone of Doctor Who. It was the first one. It had to succeed so that others could follow. And I don't think anyone could say it didn't succeed. The evidence is before us.
And there's an argument I make half flippantly. There's quite famously the old Trivial Pursuit question: who created Doctor Who? And obviously the answer they put there was Terry Nation. And the thing is, no, he didn't do any of the development. He didn't get it screened. Didn't do anything like that. But again, with the Daleks, with those monsters, and then with the Earth invasion paradox, does really create a template for the one that Innes Lloyd brings it in and turns Doctor into an adventure series rather than an exploration one. So in a sense, Terry Nation does kind of create Doctor Who as we know it.
But then Terry Nation's ideas for an adventure series needed the more roundedness of David Whittaker's characterization, and it needed the humanity of a Verity Lambert. So again, you're getting back to Doctor Who by committee. Yes. Well, number 5 is definitely one of the ones I saw the most as a child, because it was one of my mum's favourite stories. It still is. I bought her the DVD for her birthday. She didn't vote in this, but many Pertwee era fans did, shall we say, and it's just in my mind one of the all-time great stories. It is The Green Death.
Anti-Welsh again, obviously. Worthy of space in top 5 because it's the sole story in Doctor Who that mentions my hometown. It does mention Newport as a place they're getting the mining equipment from. So yeah, worth it. So what we're saying here is that the electorate loves a Welsh stereotype.
Yes. Well, I mean, consider yourself lucky. Terror of the Zygons isn't here. So clearly, the Welsh stereotypes, wonderful Scottish stereotypes. We've got other Tom.
Yeah, and they don't like the old stereotype Scottish doctors either, do they? McCoy's fine, but Capaldi.
Yeah.
Again, what do you want to say? It is kind of, I always think of the Pertwee era as this kind of the one era with brackets around it. So you've got, two one-season companions for him. Although I know Sarah Jane obviously goes on later, and then you've got the kind of the peak era where the show is probably the best produced it's ever been. Even if you don't particularly like all the stories, it's at such a level all the way through. Barry and Terry know what they're doing. They nail it. John Pertwee is confident in the role, knows what he's doing. He's toned it down a little from season 7. And Katie Manning, whatever you might think of Joe Shaw Cummings as a character compared to Liz Shaw, she's perfect. She gives it such energy as well. And then the Green Death is really the climax of all that. It's where you get Joe becoming independent, and it's a story about how the Doctor's great influence on her, and Joe is just at the heart of this story. It is Katie Manning's story, and you can just see the way Pertwee. I don't think there was much acting involved when the Doctor was at the end, when the Doctor needed to let Joe go, and quite apart from that, it's such almost a precise story. I know you had Silent Spring was in the early 60s, and the environmental message was there, but this really follows it through, and they remake it badly as Arachnids in the UK.
Yes.
40 years later, it's a precise story. Boss is such a great villain as well. Oh, and 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 it's set in Wales, which is obviously a great thing, which not enough Doctor Who stories before 2005 were.
Oh, I mean, any story influenced by James Lovelock has to be up there. Cough, the moon base, cough. But I love the origin story of Barry Letts reading about the planet and climate change and being really depressed because he wanted to speak out about it, but he didn't have a platform. And Terence Sticks pointing out, you do have a platform. You're the producer of a highly influential TV show. And Barry Letts went, oh yes, and went and wrote The Green Death.
Although, of course, Doctor Who was never about politics in the era at all.
Oh, of course not.
Perhaps not party politics, but it was absolutely engaged, as more perhaps than it ever has been before or since.
I mean, I will say that The Green Death is possibly one of the best edited of the 70s stories. Every scene fits directly into the next one, and it's all kind of goes at a pace. There's no padding, shall we say? Even the bits that you may call padding are there for plot reasons.
It moves so well for a 6-episode story.
And we set up the denouement in the first part, and Jo doesn't want to go with the doctor committed Billis free because she wants to go and see this other professor who's like a younger doctor, as she puts it. And Pertwee's the fledgling leaves the coot. It's just he's so sad.
Yeah, you can see him. He realizes the end is nigh, but perhaps he doesn't realize how nigh.
Yes, and it's got the great setup about how the Brigadier thinks the Doctor really wants to take a trip to Wales because the body's just how the Doctor likes it, green and dead. Oh. But then he goes to Metabilis Free, and it's a horror story for him.
You've been promised Metabilis 3 as this place of wonder. It's an absolute horror show.
And then when he gets back, and the phone's ringing, and he gets out the TARDIS, gets up the phone, he pauses, and he goes, "I'll speak to anyone."
Yeah, just coming straight out of it.
It's the third Doctor is at his friendliest in quite a lot of the Green Death, and it's mostly through this sort of depressed acceptance that this time that he's spent with someone he's grown to become very fond of is coming to a close.
Yeah, and again, it's kind of foreshadows the Matt Smith era and that in a lot of ways, which is all, and indeed the Tennant one, because the Doctor doesn't like saying goodbyes. He and
Uh,
it's oh,
and there's so
it's
many
hard.
great small roles in it. Like, obviously, I mentioned before, I quite like Elgin, Tony Adams, although
Yes,
obviously Fate intervened in his storyline. There's also John Rolfe as Fell, such a Terry Nation named character there because he falls to his doom.
on
But
the nose.
his tragic "I have a headache," and then he's basically set to death by his boss. That sort of theatrical tones of John Derf. So he just add so much character to that. What could be another tin pot robot computer
It's
dictator?
it's kind of not what you expect from a computer. It's what you get. It ends up being quite HAL 9000.
Yes. Uh, about how Stevens is getting his kicks like Little Nietzsche and yes. So, Jerome Willis is Stevens, such a
Oh,
uh,
wonderful performance.
it's just it's and then in a red shirt role you've got Roy Evans, who was a villain back in the Dalek Master Plan, is this
Yeah,
tragic miner called Bert, who Joe desperately tries to keep alive even though she can't. And when they reveal that she failed and he died in hospital later that day, the story actually stopped for a moment so all the characters can mourn.
yeah,
It's
that's a wonderful bit because it gives a weight to death that sometimes isn't there in Doctor Who. Ah, and of course, I will have to bring up we are missing at least two opportunities for a Green Death action figure set. Where's the Doctor as a washerwoman? Where's the Doctor as a milkman? Come on, I need these figures in my life.
oh, and we've not even mentioned the maggots yet. The
But the maggots are
one with
fun.
the maggots. Oh,
Yeah, I mean, they worked at the time because it was remembered as the one with the maggots. It's like sea devils. So, they might look, in modern TV in general likes a bit of verisimilitude. It like, but old Doctor Who was kind of on that TV that was derived from theatre, so it wasn't the actual completely convincing nature of the effects. It was the fact they worked. And it's an ingenious.
they they blatantly worked when I was a kid, and I think they're still for the budget that we know that was involved in creating them,
Yeah.
they're remarkably well done.
I mean, maybe the giant fly isn't quite as good, but I'll come to that one at some.
But again, the giant fly works when you're 8.
Yes, and that's the important thing about Doctor Who. Does it work when you're 8? And if it does, just don't bother complaining, frankly, on that one, because
No,
that's what it's all about.
I mean, you said that you thought the greatest show in the galaxy was Eight Places Too Low. I can guarantee you, my mum, um, Dr. Barton, as others know her, if she was watching this right now, would say that Green Death is four places too low. Um, but I think if all of us would agree that it is a slice of classic Doctor Who.
Absolutely.
John, do you want to know what the top ranked Sylvester McCoy story was?
Only at number 4, outrageous. I
Number
will.
number four is the one that saved your fandom.
Yes.
We know. Remembrance of the Daleks.
So I said we'd be done in about 4 hours. I was wrong. We're about to do all that on Remembrance of Daleks and more. Yeah, I've told the story about how it saved my fandom a million times, but I guarantee you can show anyone that first episode, and it will hook them, and if not, Doctor Who, particularly of this series, isn't for them. It moves fast. It's got Sylvester McCoy knowing what he's doing as a Doctor. He and Sophie Allred have already built that relationship, and you're already sold on them as a partnership. It's got so many little moments about time travel. The Doctor, the way the Doctor gives Ace the money. Oh yeah, it's so good on the what New Series does in Father's Day, where the past is foreign country, this is the Isle of Wight, but it's still different. It's just those little differences on time travel that maybe don't get played up in other episodes of Doctor Who. And then you've got Joseph Marcel and that one conversation in the cafe.
Yes, the sugar scene.
Oh, what more do you want from Doctor Who than that?
And it's a metaphor for life and an analogy and a great scene. And it also sets the Doctor on his way. It's things just to get on with it.
Yeah, it's got a sting in the tail.
Oh,
Glorious. And it's got the greatest Dalek design of all, the special weapons Dalek, for my money. The way, yeah, the way it's almost a rusty, it's horrible, it's old, and they're wheeling it out because they need an ultimate weapon.
It's also got stairs.
Yeah, and that cliffhanger. Again, we were talking about the Daleks being sadistic in the Dalek Invasion of Earth earlier. This is what happens again. It could have just stopped at the stairs and it could have shot the Doctor. Didn't need to move. But it lets him go up the stairs, trap himself against the door, and then floats up after him. And it gives that heads up display into the cliff. Oh, Lord.
And of course, who's working with them but this demonic headmaster, not Terence Hardiman actually, but Michael Sheard.
Michael Sheard, who of course I'd seen him in Castrovalva, but we all knew him as Mr. Bronson.
Yes.
And he might not be quite as intimidating as Mr. Bronson is, but it's always wonderful to see him in that. And then you've got the blind vicar. You don't again, that's such an example of more advanced thinking in the making of the show. A regular guy who happens to be blind.
And they cast Peter Halliday. they go all out for this one scene, that guy.
Yeah. Oh, and then there's the way that you could do with effects work. You could have landed a spaceship in a playground. No, they landed a bloody spaceship model in the playground. They actually went and did the whole thing. It's oh my god.
Some great cast. I mean, one of the standouts is the great George Sewell is basically playing Oswald Mosley.
Not even with the grandeur of Oswald Mosley,
no,
just the British fascist.
comes
in with that, and again, it's kind of relevant today. That attitude, which what the kind of attitude, which is ugly, which is always kind of there a little in the psyche of an island nation,
and how he's clearly indoctrinating the young with his bile, with his sort of grandfatherly relationship with Mike.
Where he sounds quite reasonable. He doesn't shout, he doesn't rant. He is Nigel Farage 50 years earlier.
Yes. And I meet Mike, he seems quite an amiable chap, but they reveal his prejudices by degrees through little lines here and there, so that when they reveal before everyone else realizes that Ethan leaked with Sewell and therefore the Daleks, it's wonderfully done.
And again, that's another little touch is the sign in Mike's mum's window, which is the boarding house. And again, that's how distant even the recent past was then. I love it because it's Doctor Who played into nostalgia on the 20th anniversary. This is this series it's celebrating it, but apart from maybe Silver Nemesis, it's anti-nostalgia.
Yes.
It's not interested in that comfortable view of the past. It really just wants to go, this is it. This is how we've changed over the years. It's really, it's not looking back in anger, but it's looking back with, shall we say, a historian's eye almost?
I also find it interesting that we have Ace, we've got the wonderful Pamela Salim,
Oh, yes.
uh, we've got Alison, her assistant, and we've got the creepy child.
Oh,
We
definitely.
have four quite strong female characters in this story, and yet, ironically, the story wouldn't pass the Bechdel test.
That's true.
It
Characters
just
are
shows you
amazing.
that it's not a case of doing the numbers. You have to actually put the effort into your characters, which I'd say this.
But talking of the Jan Riggs, I love that little thing that that little fairy tale 5, 6, 7, 8 is a doctor. I adore the way they do the fake Davros, because you're thinking the way the voices, the helmet on, all that. You're thinking, oh, that's Davros. You think it's too obvious because that's what you expect. And I love the way they pull the rug from under you, and then they pull the rug from under you again by introducing Davros in the last episode.
Mm.
Wonderful. And the Emperor Dalek model, fabulous touch.
And I like how even the Doctor's somewhat sickened that they've imprisoned a child for their dirty work.
Yes.
And
I would go that far.
you've got the end scenario where Ace goes from hiding for her life to immediately rushing over to comfort the little girl when she's freed of the possession. Such a
Yeah.
wonderful.
And I mean, you're just looking at it, and I know the series isn't loved, and it's almost an act of guerrilla filmmaking because no one at the BBC cares about the show outside the Doctor Who production office. It allows Andrew Cartmel to get an interview with, I'd like to bring the government down. But everyone is on top of the games, and you can see it's because the Doctor was originally just supposed to shoot the Dalek in the end as a fight, and Sylvester McCoy, he knows that character so well. He's already in that mindset. He should talk it to death, and that's one of the signature scenes of his Doctor. And it's again,
A
one of those
man
things.
who knew his role inside out.
Totally. He spent almost that first year a lot of it figuring out what he wants to do with it, and now he's got it, and he just runs with it wonderfully those last 2 seasons.
And of course, the story ends on a funeral, Mike's funeral, and the Doctor and Ace stop at the door because for the Doctor, he's there to help everyone else get through this moment, but he doesn't think they should intrude on private grief.
And the Doctor never sticks around for funerals, of course, quite infamously. Moves on as quickly as possible. It's
And
so good story.
and I'm aware that that's quite difficult for the cast to watch because Mike was played by Dursley McClendon, who was a good friend of Sophie Aldred's. And unfortunately, for people who know the recent "It's a Sin" was loosely based on his life, he sadly got AIDS and died aged 30.
Absolute tragedy. And again, it's a great performance. He's got the looks, he's got the talent. He could have been the star in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, he's only 23 in this show, and he's insanely good against going against veterans.
Yeah,
Uh,
Simon Williams. Say them. Oh,
uh, Number 3, it's a classic from the Tom Baker era, and allegedly it's a story that made Matt Smith a fan of Doctor Who. It is, shall we say, it's got a P about it. It is City of Death.
and the art lies in the fact that it is there. Oh, is this the top Tom Baker story?
Yes, actually.
So this poll reflects the DWM one as well. Then City of Death is now the Tom Baker story, ahead of all the Holmes and Hinchcliffe ones. And I think it does show that you can thrill audiences with scaring them with monsters, with great production, but ultimately everyone just loves a good joke, don't they?
I think it's Dugan Mania. Everyone loves that guy.
It's basically a little romance with the Doctor and Romana, isn't it?
Yes.
They're just having fun. It's like a date for the Doctor and Romana. Yeah, we just take down world-ending threats for a weekend.
The Doctor's romantic getaway with Romana got briefly held up by a plot to save the Earth.
Oh, and it's such a brilliant idea in the first place. How do you raise all that money? You sell a ton of Mona Lisas and Gutenberg. Yes. That's quite brilliant to start with. And we do that, yeah, to go out and wipe out humanity in the end.
I mean, it's easily one of the most quotable Doctor Who stories of all time. I mean, even from this one scene, you've got "I do love your butler, he's so violent," and then "My dear, he's not as crazy as."
The way Tom Baker's in the chair just gives that little wave and the grin.
It's a Louis Cahn's chair.
He can't be as yes, he can't be as stupid as he seems. My dear, no one could be as stupid as he seems.
Oh,
And I love the gag I love in this is the one that's understated. Is we've got Scaroth as essentially the ultimate Philistine. He doesn't care about he doesn't care about the beauty. He doesn't care about how art can lift your soul. It just, I can sell this for a ton of money. It's gorgeous. And yeah, that's one of the most under-remarked things about it. Yeah, Julian Glover and Catherine Shell in as a
they're great. I mean, Julian Glover's one of the all-time greats, and we got him for two Doctor Who's somehow in his career.
He is at the top of his game in both of them in two very different roles.
I mean, there's some really funny lines which are difficult to say, which he just delivers with aplomb. Obviously, the one is that if the Doctor doesn't help him, it would be so much the worse for him. Your lady friend and many others I could name if I happen to have the Aris telephone directory upon my person. Or the somewhat casually cruel way he disposes poor David Graham.
It's the look he gives him just before, it's the last shot before the credits roll. Just that
Yes.
He's interested in the Doctor's reaction. He doesn't care about anything else.
Oh,
nominal.
And another bit, a bit of silly Tom Baker reactions that actually work in context is when he goes back to meet Da Vinci, only to find Peter Halliday's there again.
Yeah, some screws.
Yes, and he says that you'll have to speak to Captain Tancredi, and the Doctor goes, Captain Tancredi? Goes, why? Do you know him? No, never heard of him.
And then and that leads into that episode 2 cliffhanger, and that is such a great cliffhanger. Just not only the way that you get the real the way it's shot as well, just to emphasize that. Glorious.
The thing is, because I ignored City of Death for a long time because it's not one that jumps out to an 8-year-old, shall we say.
No, absolutely. And it's the first Doctor Who story I've got memories of, and it's all I can remember is the Doctor going up to that door. that was something completely random.
Only after Douglas Adams died that it was pointed out to me that Douglas Adams had written City of Death. So I was like, oh, I should probably give it a go, given I'm a big fan of Hitchhiker's Guide. And I went and watched it. But because I'd paid so little attention to it, I didn't know the cliffhanger for episode 2. So when it came along, I was like, "Oh, right, this is going places I wasn't expecting."
Yeah, and it was one of those you didn't see for years because obviously it didn't get novelized until I think 2014-ish, somewhere around there. And it's just wonderful. It's just one of those you can stick on as an adult, and you can just have it on as comfort viewing, and it is gorgeous for that. Yeah, I mean the problem with Doctor Who in kind of this era, particularly this season, is that Tom Baker is on such kind of domineering form. No one challenges him. There's no challenge for him in the whole season. There's no kind of no jeopardy really. It's just the most you have is just watching it for the fun of it. And this is kind of the only time it works because Julian Glover is just this urbane, beautiful foil to him. You know, it's almost like a double act in a lot of ways, just going back at each other.
Believe it or not, one of my favorite Holmesian double acts is actually not even in a Bob Holmes script because it's in this one, and it's the interaction duo that is Romana and Duggan trying to pull the roof and roll the doctors away.
Oh,
Romana using her braids, Duggan, if in doubt, thump it first, especially later. And one of my great regrets in Doctor Who is I so wish they just gone with the flow and added him to the TARDIS crew for the rest of that season. You imagine him thumping an emo and getting involved in.
yeah. For all that this is about art and beauty and how to appreciate it and who doesn't appreciate it, what saves the universe? What saves the earth?
Okay,
Good right hook.
but no, I mean the bit that actually had me laughing till I was like choking when I watched it again as a teenager was the bit where they break into the cafe and Dugan casually opens the bottle, smashing it off the side. And he goes, you can't make an omelette without cracking a few eggs." And Romana's line is, "If you made an omelette, I'd expect a kitchen on fire and an unconscious chef." Genius.
You know what I don't understand? I expect so.
Oh, I mean, Stephen Moffat said that City of Death is what Doctor Who would look like if a genius wrote it. And we all know he loves Douglas Adams, even more than most of us do. But yeah, at its best, it's got lines that would be in the great literature. It's got lines that Woodhouse himself would have been proud to have come up with.
Yeah, I know David Fisher's original idea was Bulldog Drummond, but it's too good for that. I've read Bulldog Drummond and it's much better.
Number 2 is the highest ranked Christopher Eccleston story and the highest ranked New Who story.
In a huge run of classic series stuff.
The Empty Child.
So yeah, what a nice segue. Stephen Moffat from Douglas.
Yes.
Lovely. It's almost like you knew what you were doing there.
Oh, I could edit for a living.
I was talking to someone who'd written one of the stories for this season, and I just went, "That was absolutely fabulous." Yeah, this is Doctor Who, and he went, "Now you wait a couple of weeks here, and you see what will come up." Because he said it is probably the best Doctor Who story that's been written, and to that point, I think he did actually have a point, because you go to this and it's a brilliant horror story. You're using a possessed kid as a horror story. There's little more horrifying than that. it's little touch. It has, you know, the touch only a fan would have. The TARDIS phone ringing.
Mhm.
It has, again, it does what Remembrance says. It shows you how different life was back then. It shows it has Rose having the wonder and the what the hell's going on of being in a different time period. It has, you know, the doc a genius cliffhanger. You know, it's them being surrounded. It's not necessarily cliffhanger. The resolution, just telling him to go to his room.
And
Oh,
it's the setup. It's the setup for a jump scare 10 minutes later.
yes.
That's,
It's like Stephen Moffat knows what he's doing. And
uh,
then obviously you went through Richard Wilson. You get Richard Wilson as a guest star, and you got a gas mask on his face, so you can't see it. Oh my god! Is that it? You've got a big name guest star, and you turn them into a monster. Oh, and then obviously you've got, and all the while we're doing this, a horror story. You've got a cavalcade of gags running alongside it, and of course the resolution. I think it was the first time I I probably did stand up and applaud at the ending of it. I was just I think it might have been the first time Doctor actually made me cry. And I'll say the previous week was for her. Yeah, obviously Father's Day. But this, you know, with the Doctor, with all the pieces slot into place, and he comes together, and this guy who we know couldn't save his own people, who had to blow them up, or as we'll later thinks he had to blow them up, gets such a beautiful moment of redemption and joy. And one of the all-time great, you know, two words, one of the all-time greats, everybody lives. And just watching his face as he says that, watching the joy of it, you got the moves, I'll show you moves. Oh my, I just adore that. And then what they do, they cap it off with a gag about the NHS and two legs.
yes.
Oh,
Oh. Although I will say I'm quite fond of the do you mind I'm trying to resonate concrete?
yeah.
But no, I love that ending with Richard Wilson's Dr. Constantine and Mrs. Harcourt. That you know,
Yes.
I got my other leg, it's going back. Of course, I walk going on. Did you miscount them? Um, although I should point out, it went under the radar, and I've only just found out in the last few days from the stage. Vilma Hollingbury, who played Mrs. Harcourt, died in September 2021. It was under the radar. Um, but she has such great timing and such a small scene in
Oh,
this. And also she had a very strong career outside of Doctor Who, but that's Doctor Who getting these great actors into little parts.
I know it's like people say, you know, oh, Olivia Colman would have got for a quite sick. She was the villain in that, for God's sake. But it's a sign of how big Doctor Who is, that you can get people, you can get great actors in these small parts, even then, even when it hadn't got any reputation. When they were filming this, there was no expectation on it at all.
I mean, it's a trope as old as time because Barry Letts said that had he known one of the smaller roles in the Time Warrior was going to have June Brown cast in it, he'd have had it much expanded.
Yeah. Oh,
But yes, I mean, it's miles ahead of every other New Who in this poll, and I think we're nearly 2 decades on, and it still holds as a great bit of weirdly hopeful horror. So it's time for number one, what you all voted for as your favourite Doctor Who story. And to be honest, I'm shocked looking at the list that you all seem to think the Twin Dilemma is the greatest story of all time. Um,
I'd say I do love a contrary point of view.
has,
Did you
has,
get?
has Steve been voting in this several times over?
How many times did Steve vote here?
Oh no, sorry, hang on. My mistake. I'm miscounting episodes by four. It's actually the Caves of Androzani.
What a shock. One of those stories that will always win the polls. I think the reason it wins polls, it's, and I don't necessarily think it's the best story of all time, but I can see why people vote it that way. It is a brilliant story, but again, it's never something Doctor Who quite manages to be successfully before or since. It's one of those things that Doctor Who is a diverse thing. It's one of the shows. It's the only show that proves that the Eric Saward era can actually work, and that for that I think it works miracles.
It proves that the Eric Saward era needed sympathetic direction, shall we say?
Yes, if you have a look at Eric Saward's own script, you note how they all get the top level directors.
Yes.
Funny that.
Mhm. I mean, you get Bob Holmes in to get a little snippet of inspiration from him again after so many years. Uh you cast it to the hilt with
And beyond. It's a story. It's the casting is so good. You don't go, oh, we could have had David Bowie. That would have been great because you'd have been robbed of one of the all-time great performances in Who if you had.
yes. Um and it's so atmospherically shot.
It's Graham Harper's. Again, we spoke about this on directors. It's Graham Harper's show. He does essentially to the whole script what Grimwade did to Earthshock. He puts a rocket up its jacksie. He just
Yes.
it.
It's been it doesn't quite do the six villains of note, but it tries its best in four episodes to equal the war games because you've got Dotsy, played by the great Scottish Maurice Reeves.
Morris Reeves,
Uh,
who was for a long time, I believe, the only person who was in Star Trek and Doctor Who.
mm-hmm.
First person I think who
And
did him
Tutti Frutti.
and Teddy Freeman, which I've not long watched.
uh,
Brilliant performance.
he's very good in that, but that's very grim. uh, you've got Shadow's Jack, uh,
Mr.
a
Gate.
tragic villain played by Christopher Gable. You've got Morgus, played by one of my favourite 80s regulars on TV, John Normington.
And then
Um,
the way he delivers the monologues, the script. I know it was
yes,
a misunderstanding originally, but for a piece of serendipity, it makes those scenes.
if in doubt, go Richard III. It's
Yeah.
worked for 400 plus years.
Always a wise choice.
Yes. I mean, and then you've got the Philip Glenister. No, Robert
Robert,
Glenister.
Robert Glenister.
Robert Glenister in one of his early roles is Celatine, who I quite like. And he's kind of treated as a red shirt after four episodes of being one of the more amicable characters in this planet.
Totally.
Um, I don't think I wouldn't call. I'd call he's an antagonist to the companion, the Doctor, but I wouldn't call him and Shellac general villains per se. They're just soldiers stuck in a horrific war,
Yes.
and it doesn't look. I don't think they had a choice in their conscription based on what we know of Androzani.
They they're not villains, but I think it's everyone's a bit all again, I think it's been observed Perry and Fred yeah. The women are the only survivors of an all-male bloodbath. The villain is toxic masculinity here.
True. Um, I mean, it's very much your sci-fi crapsack world, but almost all the characters in it acknowledge they live in a dystopia and are trying to take advantage of that fact.
They want to get out of there. They want revenge, obviously, Jack, or they just want to make the money and get out of there and just live comfortably, which is an entirely relatable motive.
And I like how every character's downfall comes through lack of communication with other characters.
Oh,
They
yeah.
all it all intertwines. It's Doctor Who at its most Shakespearean because they all fall through their own flaws.
The Doctor dies because of his own curiosity initially, obviously eventually. And again, as you mentioned in one of the other stories you discussed, it's this Doctor dies because he's selfless, and that's why that's the only kind of win that he can have in this kind of dystopia, in just helping his companion survive.
Oh, it definitely it's a great example of the sort of children of men style sci-fi, shall I say. And
Yes.
it's interesting to see it in Doctor Who, and I can see why people like it, but by God, I wouldn't want the show to be like that every week.
No, not at all. I said this is why I wouldn't have it as a personal favorite. I think it's brilliant that the series can do this and do it so successfully. But yeah, I want the gags. I want the silliness. I don't mind that it's filmed by that it's followed by a story about a giant slug trying to check a planet into the sun. I mind the first episode, but not the rest of it.
Oh,
Yeah, and to a certain extent, I think it's got a reputation because it's the fans of the fans around 80s at the time, particularly the old ones. It's Doctor Who could be adult. It can do serious. It can it can be this grown-up show. And yes, it can, but it didn't. Being serious isn't necessarily what you need to be grown up. But again, it made Eric Saywood think that his version of the show could work, and you need a Bob Holmes style script writer to
yes.
make it work.
From these seeds came Attack of the Cybermen. Well, I think that's everyone's favourite Doctor Who stories, voted for by you, the fans. Please remember to like and subscribe and feel free to chat in the comments below. Uh, I'd like to thank my colleague Mr. Arnold for such erudite views on so many Doctor Who stories over the last few months as we've recorded this, and the fact that he's had to speak for Britain at many points while I got over a bloody cold. So, till next time. Ta.